Okay.
Like, she left the car place.
Okay, so Lashon, again, concerning leasing, I want to go over the details with you, just so you understand. You said you leased in the past, but it's been a while since you did. Remind me, when did you say that was that you had leased in the past?
Probably like 2005.
How many hours what you did?
The Blazer.
That was
That's 11 years ago. So,
that's the precursor to.
okay, but that's a while ago, 10 to 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been a minute. Okay, so a couple of things. You said that when you did it, at the time that you did it, that was your first time leasing, and you had gone over on the miles, and so you got hit with some penalties on the miles. Do you recall approximately what the penalties were, or
If I'm not mistaken, it was like 25 cents a mile.
something like that?
So when I got the car, I was working local. Then I started working up in Bridgewater, and
Yeah.
just like demolished me.
It gotcha. Okay. Now, anticipating your future needs, do you anticipate any significant life changes in the next 3 years? And if so,
I'm hoping to leave my job one day
okay.
in the next year or so.
And will that shrink or increase the miles that you drive? It would increase your miles. Okay. So what we're going to do is let's project for like a, if you want to say worst case scenario. Okay. So what is the average miles you've been driving now?
20 minutes. So that's about 20 miles, I guess.
Something give or take 20 miles
Yeah.
there, 20 miles back.
To Neptune, yeah.
So about 40 to 50 miles on average a day. And then on the weekends, you getting out about much, hitting the clubs and all that?
No.
Not going up to the big city? And no, okay.
No.
So we're averaging something around, let's say, 50 miles a day and 30 so days, so that's about 1,500 miles a month or something.
Okay, yeah.
Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
So what are the miles you have on your current vehicle?
185,000.
And do you recall like when you bought it or how long you've had it, so we can kind of make sure that the
I
miles...
bought it in 2006 and it had like 5 miles or something.
So it's been 10 years and you've done 180... So you're doing almost 18,000 miles a year now. Okay, which at 15,000 miles a month, or 1,500 miles a month, that's about right.
Okay.
So you're right around 18. So if we wanted to protect your miles going forward, if we anticipate even more driving, how much more driving would we anticipate? Like, how do you see it changing?
I mean, I could commute up to... the job would be up in North Jersey.
Okay. So give me an idea of like how much, what are we talking probably?
Maybe 45 miles one way.
Okay, so we'd basically be doubling the miles basically, right? Something like that.
Right.
So if you're going to be doubling the miles, you'd be going in from, if you're doing 18,000 miles, you'd be going into up to 30,000 miles in a year. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. Now, there's two aspects when it comes to leasing. One of the things about leasing is if you pre-build or pre-buy your miles, what you're doing by doing so is you're guaranteeing the future value based on the estimated miles.
Okay.
Okay? Why that's important, even for people who drive high miles. Like, I'm a road warrior myself. I spend a lot of time in my car, so I'll prepay my miles and buy an extended mileage lease, because what it does is it guarantees the value of the car at a depreciated amount where I have new options in 2 or 3 years at my lease term, versus, see, here's the reality. For example, people are like, well, I don't want to be stuck with miles. But the reality is, you got to understand, every car you drive, every mile you drive on that car is depreciating the value anyway, right?
Right.
So it doesn't matter if it's on a lease or on a purchase. If you put 20,000 or 30,000 miles a year on a car,
Right.
the value's going to drop.
Right.
Now, on a traditional finance, the challenge typically is, do you have that pen? Yeah, so here, if I draw this out for you, this is the way to kind of think about it, right? So here's what typically happens. On a traditional purchase, over time, you're making payments, and as you make your payments over time, the interest amount that you pay decreases, and the principal amount increases. Right? So in the very beginning of your payments, like let's say you have, for example, a $500 payment, just as an example. In the beginning, you might be making, out of that 500, 380 of it is going to interest and 120 of it's going to principal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So as time happens and payments happens, there comes a point at about a 3-year mark where you're really now at about that halfway, where now when you make a payment, you're starting to gain principal instead of interest. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Now, this is why leasing, I think, becomes interesting. Now, on a traditional finance, to get the payment as low as possible, which most customers want,
Right.
they end up going longer term to
Right.
stretch out and keep the payment budget in line. So to get that low payment, they stretch out the term, which increases the interest amount that they're paying. So instead of it being 3 years, it might be 3.5 before they break even. Problem with the math that you're showing me is if you're saying you might have up to 30,000 miles in a year, is at 3.5 years, you're now at 75,000 miles on a car that you still owe basically 3 years on.
Right.
You're just now starting to make equity in your payments, but that's based on an average miles,
Right.
which you won't be doing.
Right.
Which means that in 3.5 years, that car's 75,000 miles on it, and you are still got 3 years left on a loan. But your car's value has depreciated dramatically faster than it would normally. So you just don't get ahead of the curve until you get over here to like 4.5 or 5 years, when you're really even close. But by then, now you've got 125 or 1,000 miles on the car. So what's the value of that car that you're still now making $500 payments on? So you're making a $500 payment on a car with 125,000 miles that you're still upside down in.
Right.
That's really jammed up. So with your current job, or with the future new job, will you get mileage credits from your employer? Will you get a per mile allowance?
Generally, yes.
What typically would that be approximately?
Typically, they use the federal guidelines. I think
It's
it's like
55. So will they give you as a mileage reimbursement then?
usually yes.
Yes. So you get a mileage reimbursement of 55 cents per mile. Okay. So can you use your calculator on your phone real quick, or yeah, and do 55 cents and do that times 30,000. Okay. So that means at that rate you're getting an allowance of 16.5 per year. Now divide that by 12. Which means you're actually then at 13.75 at the mileage rate that you're at. You would basically getting 13.75 as a credit back to you.
Right.
So let's say that by prepaying your miles up front and giving yourself the 2-year out window, if you did like a 30,000 mile a year for 2 years, 60,000 mile lease, if you did something like that, if your payment, again, I'm not saying you would do this, but if your payment came in at $750 even, you're still netting approximately whatever the difference is there. What's the difference between that? $575. You're still coming out $575, and you have no negative equity, and you don't have any mechanical issues. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're under the warranty of the car.
Right.
You're protected. You're safe. It's reliable, and you hit hard reset in 2 years again. And 2 years from now, your situation may change again.
Right.
You see what I mean?
So it's a 2-year lease.
I'm not saying you would do one. I'm
Oh.
saying that might be an option to explore.
Okay, gotcha.
What I'm saying is, as somebody who, like I said, I personally leased something like 8 or 9 cars. My wife is going on. She just did her third lease herself, and have helped hundreds of customers do leases, even people who have high miles. Depending on the programs, it may still make sense to lock in and buy your depreciation up front and have it guaranteed, versus lock in a long-term loan, rank up these miles, and then when you come in here in 2 or 3 years with 60,000 miles, and you have like no options, and you're buried in a car that you. So it's like pay me now or pay me later.
Right.
But the difference this time is that by your mileage allowance that you get, assuming you get that allowance, if you're getting that much in either income reimbursement or if, I don't know how they do it. How did they do it for you in the past? Would they do it as a reimbursement?
Typically, you invoice it, and then
And it's added to your income basically, right?
Right.
Yeah. So then basically you're getting an allowance of $13.75 a month to drive the car, based on miles. So even if your payment was, like I said, $750, you still come out a net positive ahead of $575 with your mileage adjustment. That to me is way better to secure and know with certainty what your options are in 2 years. Because at the end of the 2 years, let's say that your situation had changed and you didn't end up driving that many miles.
Right.
Well, then what you do is you have the option to buy the car out. And now you can buy the car at the end of the 2 years, and since it doesn't have the miles that it was predicted, your value is going to be higher than the guaranteed buyout, which means you'll have equity.
Right.
And now you have equity on a car that that's been a good car. You can do a 4-year loan, which would have been the equivalent of the 72 months to begin with.
Right.
and you're solid again. So either way, you don't lose, is my thought. So if the programs allow you to do a 24-month and do an extended miles, which I don't get into that side that much, but I would encourage you to investigate the option,
Okay.
because it buys you options, it buys you security and peace of mind, and it locks in your options at the end instead of feeling trapped at the end. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Did I do a decent job explaining
You
it?
did.
Gavin, did I do an okay job? What follow-up questions or concerns do you have about what I showed you?
No, it makes total sense.
Okay.
As long as I can get the extra mileage, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, if you
That
can
was
prepay
my
the
only
miles.
concern with it.
Yeah, so you can prepay them as part of the lease, or you can buy them at a discounted rate by buying them in advance. So you basically buy them as credits up in advance. So instead of it being a penalty of whatever, 25 cents, you might be able to buy them in advance at 15 or something. Okay? Either way, 15 compared to the 55 you get,
Right.
you're still coming ahead a net 40 cents,
Right.
per mile. So you still don't lose.
Right.
Now I have to ask you, you're wearing the nursing garb. Are you nursing?
I am a research coordinator.
What does that mean?
So we do like research studies, cancer, women's health studies.
Oncology stuff and women's health? And you do that for like a clinic or a private
That's
service?
the hospital, Jersey Shore Hospital.
Okay. You've been doing that for a while?
Been there 11 years.
So do you actually work directly with patients? You do. I find that fascinating. The grace, compassion, and heart people have to do that every day, to work with people who are in pain all the time and who are in need all the time. It's a unique gift of mercy, I think. Well, listen, thank you for allowing me to take a few
Well,
minutes.
thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to turn it into a training opportunity, make Christina better. Has you been doing a good job?
Yes, she's
Should we
great.
keep her for like one more day, maybe?
At least.
At least one more day. You're safe for a
At
day.
least.
That depends.
We didn't get to him yet.
She hasn't got over here to me yet.
Oh, okay. So we'll check back with you in a little bit then, Gavin, and see if you approve of her employment for one more day, okay? All right, thanks, guys. I'm going to stop the recording.